The espresso machine let out a long hiss, and Mara set the cup on the counter without looking at it, because she already knew it was perfect, and she had 17 more to pull before her replacement showed at noon. Sophia sat on the supply closet step with her backpack between her knees, coloring in a drawing she'd started on the bus, one purple crayon worn to a nub from overuse. The cafe was 3/4 full on the last Friday before Christmas, every table carrying the particular noise of people who had somewhere warm to be and weren't thinking about who was making their drinks. Mara wasn't thinking about them either. She was thinking about the $4,200 still sitting on the billing portal of Dr. Palma's clinic on 10th, the respiratory bill from October, when Sophia's breathing had gone bad enough that Mara had sat in a plastic chair at 2 in the morning, listening to the wheeze and counting what she could move around in her checking account to cover the first installment. She had moved nothing in the end. The installment was still pending. The cafe paid $14 an hour, and after rent and Sophia's school lunch account and the bus pass, $14 an hour left very little room for a clinic billing portal on 10th Street. That was the shape of her mornings. Coffee, Sophia. The number 4,200. And the practice of not thinking too hard about any of it. She noticed the man in the corner the way she noticed most things in a room she was responsible for, without fully stopping to look. Dark coat, unremarkable from behind, a single espresso at his elbow that had gone barely touched since she delivered it 20 minutes ago. He was reading something on his phone and hadn't asked for a refill. The coat was good wool. The watch was the kind people didn't buy themselves. She filed that away the way she filed everything and turned back to the bar. The door opened and brought in cold air and Celeste Hargrave. Mara knew Celeste the way she knew every regular who treated the cafe as an extension of their living room. By order, by table preference, and by the specific quality of their impatience. Celeste took oat milk, no foam, and she always arrived after the rush so she wouldn't have to stand behind anyone. She wore her fur collar coat even in mild cold, and carried her bag on her forearm with a particular tilt, as though the bag were being presented. Sophia looked up from the supply closet step. Celeste's gaze landed on Sophia first, then on Mara, and something in the arrangement seemed to satisfy a private joke. She stopped in the middle of the floor, 3 feet from the corner table, and spoke at a volume that carried to the bar and to the window seats, and probably to the street. "Is that your daughter?" she said, sitting on a step in a workspace, coloring. She tilted her head. Pathetic. The word dropped into the noise of the cafe, and the noise briefly rearranged itself around it. Sophia looked at her crayon. Mara finished wiping the steam wand. She set the cloth down. She said, "She's waiting for school drop-off. Can I get your usual started?" "I'm just saying what everyone is thinking," Celeste continued pleasantly. She hadn't moved toward the counter. She was scanning the room instead, in the way of a person checking who had heard her. A child on a storage step. You do know there's a term for this kind of thing. The man in the corner went very still. Not the stillness of someone startled. The stillness of someone who had made a decision and was now simply waiting for the right moment to act on it. Mara didn't know this distinction yet. She would. He set his phone on the table face down. He turned and looked at Celeste with the specific quality of attention that made the 2 nearest tables realize, at the animal level, that something had changed in the room. His voice, when he used it, was not loud. "Celeste," he said, "sit down or leave." 4 words. He did not look away from her while he said them. The entire room was watching Celeste's face go through its stages, the performance relaxing, then tightening, then settling into something that resembled composure, but was missing its structure entirely. She left. The door closed and the noise of the cafe resumed, but a half-degree quieter, the way a room sounds after lightning and before anyone has counted toward thunder. If you've ever watched a whole room recalibrate around a single quiet sentence, you know exactly what Mara felt standing behind that bar. Leave a comment if this story is already doing something to your chest, because there is a great deal more to come. Mara made the espresso she would have made for Celeste and drank it herself, standing, which she never did. Sophia went back to her drawing. The man in the corner put a $50 bill under his cup, stood, buttoned his coat, and walked to the door. He did not look at Mara again. A second man materialized from the table near the window, which Mara had not noticed him occupying. He crossed the floor and placed a card on the counter in front of her. Small card, heavy stock, a phone number printed in plain type, and nothing else. "Mr. Torres's information," he said, in the tone of a man conveying routine paperwork. "If anything requires attention." "No," Mara said. He looked at the card, then at her. "Of course," he said, and left it. Mara put the card in her apron pocket, not because she intended to use it, but because Sophia was watching, and she wasn't going to have a discussion about it in front of the whole cafe. The shift ended at noon. Mara walked Sophia to school 6 blocks east. The card still in her pocket, her mind moving around the morning the way a tongue moves around a sore tooth. The man's name was Torres. She knew the name from the neighborhood the way everyone knew certain names in certain neighborhoods. Not from news, not from anything she could cite, but from the quality of quiet that happened when those names were mentioned. She dropped Sophia at the door, watched her go in, and threw the card in a recycling bin on Arbor Street. That evening, standing in the kitchen of her apartment on the 4th floor of a building that smelled of other people's cooking, she heard a knock at her door that was not the knock of her neighbor about the mail. Roberto Torres stood in her hallway without a coat, which was strange, as if he'd come from somewhere nearby rather than somewhere that required a car. He was carrying a container of soup from the deli on her corner, which was stranger still. "I'm not looking for anything," he said before she could speak. "I wanted to make sure the day ended better than it started." "Mr. Torres," she said. "Ro," he said, "if that's easier." She took the soup because Sophia was hungry, and because there was no version of herself that refused food for her daughter out of pride. She told him this plainly. He nodded as though it was a reasonable accounting. He stayed in the doorway for exactly the length of time it took her to put the soup on the counter and turn back to him, and then he said good night and left. She stood in the kitchen for a while after the hallway went quiet. The next morning, Sophia's school drop-off included a black sedan, parked 2 feet from the building door, and a man who introduced himself as Nico, Mr. Torres's associate, who would be available for school runs on the days when Mara's shift started before drop-off hours. He said this with the same deadpan courtesy he'd applied to the card on the counter, the courtesy of a man treating a 7-year-old school route as a logistical operation requiring a minimum of 2 variables and a contingency plan. Mara said, "I didn't agree to this." "No," Nico said pleasantly. "But Sophia's school opens at 7:45 and your shift starts at 6. I have time." Sophia had already gotten in the sedan. Mara stood on the curb in the cold and watched the car pull into traffic in the direction of school and thought about what category of trouble this was. The category she identified was the kind you don't fix by standing on a curb. The school run became a fact of their mornings. Nico was scrupulous about it, the kind of scrupulous that is both efficient and faintly comic. He brought Sophia a hot chocolate in a proper cup with a lid, noted her preference for the door-side seat, and once appeared at pickup carrying her backpack because she'd called the sedan's number from the school office when she forgot it. He treated these events with the same mild procedural gravity he applied to everything, as though forgetting a backpack was a situation requiring measured response rather than anything like warmth. Mara appreciated the dryness of him. It made the arrangement feel less like charity and more like logistics, which was a distinction that mattered to her. Then the letter from Dr. Palma's clinic arrived. It was a single-page clinic letterhead, confirming a zero balance on the account. Patient, Sophia Voss. Previous outstanding balance, $4,200. Current balance, 0. Date of settlement, 12 days prior. Mara read it twice. Then she called the clinic. The woman at the front desk confirmed the payment, described it as a cash settlement processed through their billing office, and said there was nothing further required of the account holder. No insurance had been involved. No repayment plan was attached. $4,200 gone. She went to Rose Building the next afternoon, the letter folded in her coat pocket. She knew the building because Nico had mentioned it once without being specific, and she had been specific enough in her own head to fill in the rest. 31 floors, glass and steel. No signage on the exterior except a street number. The doorman, a wide man in a good coat named Pete, did not ask who she was. He said, "Mr. Torres is expecting you, Miss Voss," which meant Roe had known she was coming before she decided to come, a detail that should have alarmed her more than it did. The elevator opened directly into the living space on the 28th floor, which would have been impressive, except she was too focused to be impressed. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread below in gray December light. A kitchen that looked used rather than displayed. Roe was standing at the counter with his jacket off, a mug in his hand, not performing relaxation. She put the letter on the counter. He looked at it. He didn't pretend not to know what it was. "You had no right," she said. "No," he agreed. "I'm not something you fix." He set the mug down. When he spoke, it was carefully, in the register of a man who had thought about what was true and was choosing to say it rather than something easier. "I know you're not. Sophia coughed for 3 weeks in October, and you sat in that clinic by yourself at 2 a.m, and you covered it alone. I noticed. I shouldn't have let it sit." The specificity of it stopped her. He knew the time. He knew the weeks. "How long have you been watching my cafe?" she said. "Since April," he said. "I come in most mornings." She thought about April. She thought about how many mornings she had registered a coat and a watch and filed it away without completing the file. "I want to pay it back," she said. "I know you do," he said. "We can figure that out later. Right now, I'd like you to sit down and tell me if Sophia is fully recovered." The directness of the question undid the argument she'd been prepared to have. She sat down. She told him that Sophia was fine, that the respiratory episode had been acute but resolved completely, that Dr. Palma had confirmed it at the follow-up. He listened without interrupting, which was a quality she had forgotten men could have. She stayed for an hour. She did not stay for dinner, though, he offered. She had a principle about dinner, what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known when she left, was that he had found something that morning that had been sitting in his coat pocket since the cafe visit 3 weeks earlier. He had reached in for his phone before she arrived, and found instead a piece of paper folded into quarters. He'd unfolded it to find a crayon drawing done in the particular ambitious style of a 7-year-old who knows exactly what she wants to draw and is not limited by technical accuracy. 2 figures, tall and small, standing in front of something that was probably a door. The tall figure wore a coat. The small figure wore a backpack. The word Sophia was printed in the corner in purple because Sophia signed everything. He had stood in his kitchen with that drawing open in his hand for a longer time than he would have admitted. It was not obligation that made him want to protect them. He understood then. It was something that had no procedural category and needed none. You could leave a comment on that if you want. Some things deserve a pause. The intimacy between them built the way cold builds in a room, gradually, and then all at once. There was an afternoon in early December when the city was putting up lights on the major streets, and Sophia was at a classmate's birthday party, and Mara arrived at his building without a letter or a grievance, which was new. He made coffee. She sat on the window bench and looked at 31 floors of airspace between her and the pavement, and thought about how she had never in her adult life lived above the 4th floor of anything. He sat in the chair across from her, and they talked about nothing significant for a while, which was itself significant, because neither of them did that easily. "What was it?" she said eventually. "About that morning, specifically. You must have heard things like that before." He considered it. "I've heard worse," he said. But Sophia was drawing. She had a purple crayon and she was drawing, and she didn't look up when Celeste said it. He paused. She'd heard it before. That's what I couldn't leave alone. Mara looked at her hands. "She's heard it before," she confirmed quietly. He moved from the chair to the window bench, not crowding her, just closing the distance to a measure that was honest. He put his hand over hers, palm covering knuckles. He said, "Not from here, not anymore." It was the least theatrical sentence she had ever heard, and it reached further into her chest than anything theatrical ever had. The first time he kissed her, she was standing in his kitchen doorway with her coat still on, because she had been about to leave and had not left. And he had said her name once, in a way that made leaving seem like an action she'd already decided against. She stayed. She let him take the coat. She stood in his kitchen in her cafe uniform, and the specific awareness of being looked at by someone who was not looking for what was wrong with her. He said, "You've been carrying this particular posture since April, like you're waiting for the next thing to go badly." "I usually am," she said. "I know," he said. "I'd like that to stop." The second beat was the coat itself, draped over the kitchen chair and his hand at her shoulder, careful, at a distance that was asking rather than assuming. She turned toward it. The third beat was a door, her choosing to stay on the inside of it. The fourth was waking up with Christmas lights from the building across the street, printing slow rectangles on the ceiling. Sophia asleep in the second bedroom she had been given without fanfare, and the particular quality of silence that belongs to a space where nothing is about to go wrong. The fifth was him bringing coffee to the window bench in the morning without being asked, because he had been paying attention to her for 8 months and knew how she took it. Mara sat with the coffee and watched the city hold itself together below and thought, "This is a thing I could break if I'm careless." She held it carefully. What she did not know yet was that 3 days before Christmas, Kasarov was going to take her daughter. Drev Kasarov ran debt acquisition for a syndicate that operated out of the Port District, and he had been watching Roberto Torres's visible softness with the professional attention of a man who sees a window and immediately measures it for breach. A school run, a sedan driven by a known associate, a woman and a child, unguarded, predictable, at 7:45 every morning on the same route. He had gotten the school route from Celeste. Mara didn't know about Celeste's connection yet. She would. On the morning of the 22nd, Nico did not arrive at 7:45. He arrived at 7:43, which was itself the first sign, because Nico was precisely on time in the way that precise people are when precision is the whole architecture of their day. But the car that arrived at the school gate at 2:50 during afternoon pickup was not Nico's sedan. It was a gray car, nondescript, and the woman who got out of it walked to Sophia with the specific efficiency of someone who had rehearsed it, and said she was there on behalf of Mr. Nico. Sophia was 7 years old and trusting and had been told that Nico's car was safe. The school's office called Mara at 2:58. She was on the service stairs of the cafe when the call came through. The stairs being the one place in the building she could take a call without being heard from the floor. She listened to the school secretary's voice for 30 seconds, and then she was running. She did not call Ro first. She called Nico, because Nico had given her his number for exactly this kind of thing, and because her mind was working very fast through everything she knew about the building she was about to enter. The number Nico traced within 4 minutes put the gray car at a parking structure on Clement Street, 3 blocks from the port. The structure had a fire door on its east face with a horizontal panic bar, the kind that triggered a building alarm when released from inside and sent a pulse to the fire control panel in the attendance booth. Mara had worked a catering shift in that structure 2 years ago. She knew the door. She arrived before Ro. She arrived on foot because the bus was faster than waiting. The gray car was on the 2nd level, Nico had said, north corner, and she took the pedestrian stairs and came out through the fire door corridor and saw, 30 feet away, a man she did not recognize standing outside the gray car, phone in hand, watching the ramp. He had not seen her yet. Sophia was in the car. She could see Sophia's backpack through the rear window. Mara moved to the east fire door, pressed her back to the wall beside it, and pulled the panic bar down hard. The alarm went off at 110 decibels. The man by the car turned toward the sound. Nico appeared at the ramp end. 2 other men she had never seen materialized from the level below. And then Ro was there. Through the pedestrian door she had come in, his face showing nothing, moving through the space with the economy of a man who had done this kind of thing before, and found no drama in it. Kasparov was not in the structure. He had been at the building's entrance, on his phone, when the alarm fired. And by the time he processed what had happened, he had 3 men between himself and the only exit that mattered. Rose spoke to Kasparov for approximately 90 seconds. Mara did not hear it, because she was already at the car door, because the door was unlocked, because Sophia was frightened but not hurt, because Sophia put her face against Mara's shoulder and said, "You found me," in a voice that made every other fact temporarily irrelevant. What happened to Kasparov was not explained to Mara in detail. She did not require the detail. She required only that it not happen again, and from the quality of the drive back to the building, the silence of Nico's usual composure replaced by a different kind of quiet. She understood it would not. She held Sophia in the back seat. Rose sat beside her without touching her. Not because he didn't want to, but because she needed her hands for her daughter, and he understood the priority. He rested his forearm on the back of the seat, close enough that his sleeve touched her shoulder, which was the available version of what he wanted to offer. Sophia fell asleep against Mara's shoulder, somewhere on the bridge. Ro looked at his daughter sleeping, which was, at that moment, what she was. The gala happened on the evening of the 23rd at a hotel 20 blocks north. The kind of event that rented out 2 floors and a rooftop terrace and served champagne on trays by people in black vests who made less in a night than the flowers in any single arrangement cost. Ro attended these things periodically because the construction and logistics front had interests in the hotel's upcoming renovation contract, and because certain rooms were worth being visible in. Celeste was there. She had been invited before the connection to Kasparov was established, and the invitation could not be quietly rescinded without advertising a problem. Nico had confirmed the Clement Street burner number traced to her building address 2 days prior, routed through a conversation log that Ro's organization had accumulated across a month of surveillance she had not known about. She had passed the school-run details to Kasparov, across 3 phone calls in November. Mara wore a dress she'd borrowed from a friend, dark green, which fit her well because her friend had good taste and a generous attitude toward lending. She wore it with the deliberate awareness of a woman who knows she is walking into a room for a reason and is wearing the reason plainly. Rose's hand was at the small of her back as they entered, which was not a proprietary gesture so much as a geographic one. This is where I am, and this is where she is. And these 2 facts are now a single fact. The room registered it, not dramatically. The way a room registers a change in weather, a shift of attention, a recalibration of distances, a series of small realignments in who was standing where. Celeste was near the bar when she saw them. She held her glass steady, which required some effort, because the man at her elbow at that moment was the head of the hotel group's legal counsel, who was, as of 3 hours ago, aware of the Kesarov connection and the surveillance log, courtesy of a quiet call from Rose's firm's attorney. Rose crossed the room with Mara and stopped 2 feet from Celeste with the expression of a man who has said everything he needs to say and is now simply present for the conclusion. "You told him where she went to school?" Rose said. Not a question. A 7-year-old. The room around them was not watching in the theatrical sense. It was watching in the way people watch when they understand something real is happening, and they do not want to miss the shape of it. Celeste opened her mouth. The sentence she started did not find its end. "Her name," Rose said, "is Sophia. She's 7 years old. She was in that car for 40 minutes. He paused for the length of a breath. "You and I are finished. Every room we've ever shared is finished. If I'm told you've come within a block of Mara or her daughter or anyone associated with them, I will make certain you understand the cost." His voice had not risen. It had, if anything, dropped. The legal counsel quietly set his glass on the bar and found a reason to be elsewhere. Celeste left through the service exit, not the main door, because the main door required passing through too many witnesses, and she had lost the ability to perform in front of witnesses. She did not look back. Mara stood in the space this left and let herself feel the specific, vertebral sensation of watching the thing that had been said about her daughter in front of a room full of strangers be permanently and publicly answered. It was not triumph. It was something steadier than triumph. It was the sensation of a door closing on a room where something had been wrong for a long time, and the door staying closed. She found Rose's hand without looking for it, and he held it with the precise firmness of a man who had been waiting for her to reach for something and had made certain he was where she could find it. They left the gala at 9:30. Sophia was asleep at the building on the 28th floor, in the room that had quietly acquired a purple crayon set and a spiral sketchbook at some point in the past 2 weeks, under the supervision of a woman named Diane, who worked for Roe, and whose particular skill was the ability to make children feel completely unremarkable about going to sleep in a new place. The building's lobby doorman, Pete, said, "Welcome home, Ms. Voss," when they came through the door. He said it with the cadence of a man saying something he had been looking forward to saying correctly. She noticed everything. They went up in the elevator in the silence of 2 people who have earned a quiet moment and are taking it without apology. On the 28th floor, the lights of the city came through the floor-to-ceiling glass in the specific way they came in December, when every building had something lit on its exterior. Warm and excessive and indifferent to anyone's problems, which was itself a comfort. Mara went to check on Sophia. Sophia was asleep on her back in the way children sleep when they are completely safe, with one arm over the sketchbook and the purple crayon set on the nightstand where she'd put it herself. She'd drawn something before bed. The sketchbook opened to it. 2 tall figures and 1 small one on a balcony. Christmas lights suggested by a row of orange dots. And in the corner, in purple, Sophia. And beside it, smaller, home. Mara stood in the doorway for a moment. She closed the door softly. Ro was on the balcony with his jacket on, the city unreeling below him in every direction. December cold enough to see breath. The buildings south strung with lights that made the dark between them navigable. He had a glass of something in one hand, and the folded crayon drawing from his coat pocket in the other. The one he had been carrying since the cafe visit in late November, which had been in 3 different pockets across 3 different weeks and had survived the Clement Street parking structure and the gala without a tear. Mara stepped onto the balcony, and he held the drawing out to her without preamble. She looked at it. 2 figures, tall and small, purple crayon. The coat, the backpack, Sophia in the corner. She drew it at the cafe, Mara said. She put it in my pocket, he said. Mara thought about her daughter's hands, small and purposeful, slipping a piece of paper into a coat pocket on a Tuesday morning in November, with the absolute confidence of a 7-year-old who has decided something. She decided before I did, Mara said. She did, Ro said. She usually knows what she wants. He folded the drawing back along its original creases and held it for another moment. And then he put it in the inside breast pocket of his jacket, close to his chest, where it had been since he found it and where it would stay. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into it, her back against his side, both of them looking out at the city, the 28 floors of air between them and the street, making the street feel very far away, which was a feeling she was beginning to trust. I want to stay, she said. Not the way she'd been hoping to stay that first night. Hoping as a strategy, hoping as the thing you do when you are not sure of your footing. She said it the way you say something you have decided after looking at it carefully and finding it solid. I know, he said. I've been counting on it. Below them, the city held its noise, its particular pre-Christmas noise of traffic and music and the distant compression of too many people wanting the same small number of warm places. And from the street outside the building, the lights were gold and white and orange on the pavement in a way that had nothing to do with any of it. On the table inside, Sophia's sketchbook sat open to the last drawing, the balcony page, and in the small, neat purple letters in the corner, the word that a 7-year-old had written for all of them without being asked and without being wrong.